Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to be talking about the 1984 novel Thinner by Stephen King. This was Richard Bachman's largest scale release in 1984 and eventually led to the outing of Stephen King as Richard Bachman. I'll talk a bit about that too. But I'll show you what to look for when identifying a first US and first UK edition of the book. The US edition was released in 1984 by the New American Library. Here's the front cover, there's the back cover. Pretty cool cover. It was released in a print run of 50,000 copies and sold modestly well when Richard Bachman was the author. Once Stephen King was revealed as the author, it sold 10 times as much. It was Richard Bachman's first hardcover release and most high-profile release to date, which, you know, in a way, Stephen King flew too close to the sun. It's too close to the pseudonym sun with this book, and he was eventually found out. But it's a fascinating piece of the Stephen King universe and the Stephen King puzzle. Inside the back jacket flap, there is a picture of Richard Bachman. This amuses me to no end, and it always has. This is actually the insurance agent of Stephen King's literary agent, Kirby McCauley. That is what the book would have you believe is Richard Bachman. Inside the front jacket, look for a price of $12.95. Has a bit of ephemera with it, which I'll talk about in a minute. But at some point, this was sold at a flea market or a yard sale or something for $1. Pretty good deal back in the day. Obviously, it's not great to have that written in my copy, but it was a really good price for what is turning out to be a fairly rare and elusive title. But on the copyright page, pretty straightforward. Look for a number line, first printing November 1984, and the number 1 in the number line. Underneath the dust jacket for red boards with a black cloth covering the spine and red metallic lettering. Looks pretty sharp. A couple of the cool bits of provenance that came with this book. It's a newspaper clipping from the time, from the era, explaining that Stephen King is in fact Richard Bachman. A previous owner clipped this out and left it in the book, which I think is pretty cool. And also includes a belly band, a so-called belly band. So once Stephen King was revealed as the author, copies were wrapped with this band that actually tells the truth. Stephen King writing as Richard Bachman. It's really cool to have this. I think it's just a really interesting piece of this kind of quirky publication story. It's really nice that it can be removed, so you can take it off and just see Richard Bachman's name, but you can have it and put it back if you want to see Stephen King instead. So anyway, that is the first US edition of Thinner. The first UK edition was published by the New English Library in a full-size trim. By full size, I mean it matches most hardcover books that you would find published today, most Stephen King. The US edition is quite a bit shorter. It's more in line with the size of the original Stephen King Doubleday books. So that's something that makes the UK edition unique and worth seeking out, in my opinion. There's the front cover, back cover, inside back jacket. There is no picture of Kirby McCauley's insurance agent. and that's just as well. Inside the front cover, unfortunately, my copy is price clipped. So this is something that I'm on the lookout for an upgrade to get an unclipped jacket. But on a first edition, this would have a price of £9.95. And turn to the copyright page. Look for the language. First published in Great Britain in 1985 by New English Library, etc., etc. Like a lot of Stephen King UK editions of this vintage, the paper is not super high quality and is prone to tanning, as is happening here. Even the middle part, which looks much lighter, is still more tan than it should be, more tan than it was when it was first published. And then of course the outside edges are darker still. But the fonts and everything look very similar to the US edition. The only difference is that the larger trim size just gives slightly more room to breathe. This copy is actually easier to read than the US one because it is lightweight by virtue of its cheapness, but also large enough that it's easy to read the content. Anyway, underneath the jackets, this actually does feel like cloth to me. Could be paper, but could be cloth. Anyway, brown all the way around. Gold writing on the spine. Overall, pretty sharp looking book. And that is the UK edition of Thinner. So far, Thinner has not received a US limited edition release. It has received a UK limited release by PS Publishing, who released 974 numbered copies, not signed by Stephen King, but signed by the artists, which they always do a really good job of filling the books with art. It's another attractive, eye-catching edition. It was also released in a 26-copy lettered edition, which was signed by Stephen King, as well as the artists, and had a bunch of bells and whistles. The PS lettered editions, I think, go to people who have some kind of a subscription or who are lined up to buy every lettered book that comes out. It wasn't released to the public as far as I'm aware. I may be wrong on that, but anyway, we're talking $2,500 when it was new. So the books, their lettered editions have gone up in value, but they started out so expensive that they're still sort of in the same ballpark. The numbered editions are a good investment. I think Thinner was probably around $100 when it first came out, and now is $200, $250, even more. So it's a good investment. But I am more than satisfied with the US edition and the UK edition. They are distinct from each other. I was really surprised when I ordered the UK edition and received it to find out that it was a full-size hardcover and significantly larger than the US edition, which is something I didn't know until I received it. I think the idea of Richard Bachman is kind of fascinating, and it wasn't until the last couple of years that I picked up Thinner and that I read it for the first time, and I found it to be kind of grungy, sort of high cholesterol Stephen King. I don't know what I mean by that. I can't explain it, but I hope that you understand what I'm talking about. And a little bit more pessimistic, a little bit more bleak than your typical Stephen King novel. And I love the idea, like Donald Westlake and Richard Stark, who was an inspiration to Stephen King, that you have like sunny day novels written by Stephen King, rainy day novels written by Richard Bachman. And I understand that Misery, which was already in the planning, when Thinner was released, was originally going to be a Richard Bachman novel, and I very much enjoy when I read a new Stephen King book, or I work my way through the catalog to think, if Richard Bachman hadn't been outed, could this have been a Richard Bachman novel? Could this have been a Richard Bachman novel? It's just a really interesting thought exercise. And Thinner was the last time that you can read a novel, a Richard Bachman novel, when Stephen King was writing and nobody knew who Richard Bachman actually was. So you read later ones like The Regulators, and it was as much a publicity stunt or a marketing ploy as a literary device, although I think The Regulators is a great Richard Bachman novel. But there's just something really special about reading the early Bachmans that were written when Stephen King was writing for something deeper inside, an artistic muse, and Thinner, I think, is a great example of that. It's not classic Stephen King. I mean, it is older, it's from his classic period, but it's not in my top 20, I wouldn't say, but I don't think I've ever read anything that Stephen King wrote that was bad. Nothing is badly written, with the potential exception of Rage, which kind of buzzes and grinds along. But just some things really resonate at a deeper level than others. And I liked Thinner. Just fine. I wouldn't recommend it as a place for someone who's brand new to Stephen King to start, but certainly it's something that you'll want to pick up along the course of your journey and add to your collection. So there you have it. Thinner by Richard Bachman. Thanks very much. I hope you have a great rest of your day wherever you are, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.